This meeting is being recorded.
Now we get a piece of paper and suddenly we're stupid, right, Mark? Right. Okay, Fabian, please continue.
So yeah, that's again the movement. We give affordance to things that otherwise, I mean, they do have affordances, but they are the usual one. But then again, what is that thing we give affordance to? Is it a paper, a paragraph, a single word? Is it a random arrangement of those at the same level? Is it completely heterogeneous? And I think it's a hard question, and yeah. I personally don't have an answer. Of course, the easy answer is yes, we can manipulate everything, but then if we don't have infinite amount of resources, that seems challenging. And that I believe, just to give my perspective on this, is by, for example, interviewing, let's say, Dini on what's the workflow, then we can maybe try to find not necessarily the unit of knowledge, but the one that is useful to her in that workflow. And then eventually we can build on this. It's not finite, it's not also once and done forever, but yeah, practically speaking, what do we manipulate when we're in XR?
One way of answering that question, and it's also flippant, but not flippant, is knowledge is stuff strung together. It's a sequence. Knowledge can never really be just one thing, not one word. So a basic thing, of course, is a grammatical sentence. So that becomes complicated. Oh, Dini's not joining us. Hang on a second. Just have to give her a bit of an update. Boom. Okay. Dini dealt with Didi. Yeah, so the notion then becomes what stringing together is most useful for our use. If we look at the stringing together of papers into a journal/proceedings, that is interesting and good. But what Andrew and I talked about the other day was, okay, so you have a stringing together of documents as a virtual document in a library, which is a stringing together of documents. So how to provide the affordances to the user of where they can literally pull something out and at what level that means is going to be important for us. It's like chemistry, you know, you have electrons, protons, and neutrons are probably words, and then you have atoms and molecules, and then you get higher forms. So something to think about. And Mark, I'll give you the mic in a second, but I just want to pre-agree with you that we must be very careful not to be overly concrete on this.
Oh, yeah, I'll just explain my comment was to say, wasn't meant to be flippant. I mean, I think this it actually reflected in the comments since in terms of, you know, what Fabian said. It's difficult at the moment. I think the one thing we can do is we can certainly begin to look at some of the interactions without being too set on what they're attached to. We know we want to sort of move things around and we want to interact with them. Quite how far that needs to go, I think, will be emergent. I mean, my sense is that actually it's going to be quite dynamic too, which makes it, which fits badly with nice sort of documented structural breakdowns, because what really happens is when I'm doing this project as opposed to that project, the way in which I want to tease the information apart will probably differ. And what that says to me is it's probably something I'm going to need during the session. I'm going to have to interact with the tools to sort of say, this is, in a sense, this is the granularity at which I want to work. Or I might within the session say, I now basically want to be working in a different way, because I had an interesting conversation with Adam the other day to do with some other visualization work. And one of the things we were thinking about was that essentially one of the things you sort of end up doing the moment you talk about sort of pulling things apart is you're probably making a new list, a new set of stuff in the loosest, not in the mathematics, the loosest possible terms. You're making a group of things from some source material. Now, quite what that becomes, we don't know yet because we haven't really done enough. So again, it's hard to typify what it should be. But the underlying activity seems to be XR gives us the opportunity to tease apart information in a way we broadly had to do on a piece of paper or in our head before. And so that poses sort of three questions: is, as has been raised, the granularity. The second is how we interact, how we actually sort of literally get hold of the right bit. And then the third one is, in a sense, what we want to do with it. And an example of that is what Frode's already mentioned, which is essentially, for instance, you might be wanting to construct a new binder of information based on some notion that you have whilst working in that space at the time.
Yeah, and this is why, I mean, the notion of high resolution thinking first was a bit of a joke. You know, I thought it was a bit cutesy, but it really comes into what you were saying, Mark, that we should be able to. Okay, so many years ago, when I was a student at Syracuse University in the mid-90s, yes, such a thing happened. I was a teacher for this graphic design lady, how to use the Mac. And to me, it was already so intuitive. It was actually hard to figure out how to tell her how to do it. But it came down to the most fundamental and obvious thing, which is easy to forget, and that is you got to tell the computer what you want something done to and what you want it to do. And that can be as simple as opening a file. What is the thing you want to do? This one. Well, now you need to indicate to the computer. So I think all we're really talking about now is having a really rich set of stuff that we can tell the computer we're working with. So that means that when Andrew's back in a second, I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about his perspective currently on mapping in XR. And Mark, do not allow us to finish without settling down to go back to spend at least half an hour on the paper. But I think that really going in this direction will help us better understand what the paper might be. Yeah. Also, to Mark and everyone else, the meeting with Dave Millard, of course, is always wonderful. He is actively trying to get some research to support working with us on this, because we like to build the things. He likes more to figure out what is this thing. So it could be very interesting parallel research. Yeah, Mark.
I just looping back on what you're just saying in terms of the so the chicken egg problem we have for, in a sense, if you were noting the sort of the work that Andrew's trying to do, is to sort of, it would be nice if we can say these are the things we want to work with, and therefore this is what we ought to build in it. The difficulty is that most of what we can do stuff with, we're actually at the moment almost having to hand build for perfectly good reasons. So I don't have a problem with that. The sort of challenge is that it's an iterative process really until we have to build some of these to know what will even work. And then interestingly, I think you're absolutely right in saying we're going to have to find a language, even if it's sort of facial gesture or something, or explicitly stated or typed, as to what I'm doing. Because what I think I'm beginning to see is that our presumption is that, as we often think with new technology, well, it's just going to work. You know, it's going to be just be like the food replicator on Star Trek or something. It'll just know how to make something terribly complicated. In fact, I suspect that's really not quite the case. Leaving aside things like misdetection of cues, but just the computer, us signaling to the computer what our intent is, and the fact that even if we do have a quite well-formed structure of what the various addressable units of information are, we still probably need to tell it in some way, or make a selection that at this point we're going to have, we want to have an interaction with this sort of level of thing. Right.
So one thing, while we're waiting for Andrew, one thing that I also talked to Mr. Millard, Professor Millard, whatever, last Friday was LLMs and AI. And I know that some people in this community are quite reserved in their enthusiasm towards what they are. And I think I don't mind that you are to an extent, but I also think we need to get past that. And I think Peter has solved that problem for us with the whole notion of deletable appendices. Right? So I am not somebody, other than thinking it's kind of cute when Claude does our transcripts and gets good things. I think that's nice. that is not in this context important. What I think is really, really important is two things that are back-to-back stuck together with glue. Entity extraction and being able to get rid of them, right? So everybody here should be able to have their own LLMs or AIs or whatever the heck we want to call it on any of these data sets, do all kinds of stuff when you ingest a paper or other information. And it should be ingested in a manner that if you decide that LLM is rubbish, or you have a new one, or you just don't want to deal with that, you get rid of it. Because the affordances it gives us through having connecty stuff, I think is amazing, provided it isn't kind of baked in there. It's, okay. Emily's going to pick up. I gotta say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah, so when I phrase it like that, do we agree that we should use the whole AI thing, but really in a box at a distance? Fabienne, over to you.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I'm really, I'm reading this book called Possible.
Okay. Sorry. Just because you interrupt me a few times, so I dare do it now. Give me a useful AI, for example, text in entity extraction at the end, and I happily use it. It's like I said before, let's say about transforming a piece of content to another. That's this. I'm honestly, and I do it. Like I have a page on my wiki with a bunch of different AI, including LLMs in it. So I don't want to like just how do you say whine about it. What I don't want is like saying AI magic and it can solve every problem, because I think beside the hype in terms of like epistemology, pursuit of knowledge, trying to get stuff done, it's not useful. But again, text in or whatever, PDF in, and then entities out, and we can play with it. I'm 100% in. I'm just not going to pursue things that are too high because I don't think it's productive.
Oh yeah, I think Fabienne, we're exactly on the right on agreement. But don't forget, Alfred Priest-Sloan himself, the guy who's funding some of this, he didn't like agreement too much because it's lazy thinking. So for us to go through this is really important. I see here Mark saying, does the nature design of LLMs realistically allow for removal of entities? Yes, and Mark, of all people in the whole world, okay? If you were sitting next to me, I'd have to ruffle your head right now. Depends how it's stored. If it's stored as visual meta in a separate appendix.
No, the model is the sum of all the stuff it knows about. It doesn't dynamically, each time you ask a question, go and read everything from scratch. So there is data absorbed into a model. What I was referring to in this is that my understanding is not through anyone's intent. So basically, people have been trying to make this stuff to work, and we see the wonderful things it does at the moment. The sort of things that they haven't been trying to do thus far is thinking about taking something out, because one argument is, well, why would you take anything out? It's all interesting knowledge. What we're suggesting is that yes, well, in some circumstances, you actually want to have more control over the input, but by the time it's got into the LLM, it's too late for the purposes for it to work for the purposes you want. So the question is open, and I suspect it will come. But my understanding at the moment is that large LLMs are not built to facilitate this sort of dynamic extraction of data. You can't just go to Claude and say, forget the data of the Battle of Hastings. That's just not how it works.
Well, also, when you're talking to a human, you wouldn't expect that, it's interesting what you're saying, but you wouldn't expect that, you wouldn't say to that human, do you know something about this topic, in which case I can't trust you to an extent, just to be a bit provocative, right? But
the human doesn't act like the computer. Part of the problem is we're treating the LLMs like people, and they aren't. And I see a lot of it. I mean, and it's not right. The thing is, don't take this as being a complete downer on the thing. I think it's just the onus is on us as the humans to be responsible about how we use it. And the thing that we are as a community, well, not us, but in the wider sense, we are being irresponsible about is we're treating it like general AI, and it isn't. And it has problems. So it's fine if it's getting you the fastest local ramen or something. Cool. If it's something like your next cancer treatment, maybe not so much, because it doesn't have the ability to. Doesn't have notions of truth. Doesn't really understand provenance fully. And that's not a canard against it. The state of the art is where it is, but it just isn't like a human yet.
No, it's not like a human, which is, of course, one of the biggest benefits of it. I mean, have you seen the protein folding? It turns out that generalized AIs are now actually better than specialized AIs. I think that's an interesting analogy, but we've been talking a lot. Peter, say something happy.
Okay, well, there are a couple of ways that you could go about performing the task. One, if it's looking for, say we're trying to do place name extraction, if it's approaching it from the problem of what place names have I seen before? Imagine it was trained on a set of Scottish geography, so it's going to be really good at recognizing plausible names of Scottish towns, but it might blow up if given a name from New Zealand. Or it could approach it from what is the language used around a reference to a place name, in which case it would recognize patterns of, I drove from to, or my cousin lives in kinds of phraseology, in which case it wouldn't matter what the location and makeup of the place name is. It would be recognizing, again, basically looking for a hole in the discourse. And when it found something filling in the hole, it could plausibly conclude that it's a place name based upon that linguistic pattern, as opposed to, again, starting from a list of names, and then it might be really good at recognizing men's names, or it might blow up horribly at ethnic names because it was trained on Indo-European data set, and you're now giving it a document that has names originating in Africa or some other area, and it's going to blow up horribly and become highly sensitive to what its training set looked like. So this sort of need to tease out how it's approaching it. And of course, all the AI companies treat it as a black box, and they won't tell us whether it's looking at patterns of previously identified names versus patterns of linguistic construct.
Yeah, look, absolutely worthwhile issues. Something to discuss, but I don't think it's that core to what we're doing, for the reason, Peter, that
Yeah, I was getting into the weeds there. I just couldn't resist.
No. I think you made very valid points, but I have, my first comment is experiment with them, see how you feel, see if there's some that you feel are better than others. And to re-emphasize, the ability to delete them is absolutely crucial. We do not want to pour this into our coffee. Right, and that obviously.
Right, because in the visual meta, we want to be able to, ideally, to identify which AI it was,
Yes.
what model it was that
Yes.
this extraction was based on, and some extra metadata as to how much you trust it for what kind of material it was extracting.
Yes, no, absolutely. And in the visual meta, it does say that. It also says the location and the time. Andrew, the reason I asked if you were back was not for this excitement, was for entirely different excitements. Our big thing now for, I think, most of the work we're going to be doing is the map. So I'd like you to tell us your perspective on the data, the interactions, all of those goodies. Well, I'm not saying you should have anything prepared. I certainly didn't expect it. I'm certainly not expecting you to have solutions, but I'd just really love to hear your general thinking of it now.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me. I can sort of reiterate what I understand the map to be, and that seems to be another space. It's probably going to sit along with the library, but just render differently. So it'll be like an alternate version or perhaps a second sphere. I'm not exactly sure what we want to do yet. And it'll be a collection of essentially all of the tags that we have. So it's tagging, it's a bunch of names mentioned inside the document. It would be the different citations, so and list of the different documents that are available and that their titles. And they all kind of float there with different bits of information inside them. And based on that information, you can sort them in different ways. I assume we want the lines similar to Reader. When you point at things, if it has two different documents have the same tags, they'll draw a line or something. And then you want different ways to sort them. From what it sounds to me, this is almost the same as Reader, just in the WebXR environment, which is going to add a whole new sense of depth to it. If there is something more in depth that I'm missing, please enlighten me.
Hi, Dini.
I just wanted to bop in and say congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you.
You must be feeling good right now and happy.
Yeah, no, this is nice. There's a lot of things going on in the world, in my world at the moment, but yeah, no, this is definitely nice. And it's also definitely nice in this group. Right now, we're talking about the kind of knowledge graph map thing. Also had a brief discussion on papers. We're going to be talking more, at least half an hour today, on what should go in main papers and all of that. Mark put some questions in Slack, so we will address that.
Okay, great. Well, I can't stay very long. I have lots of things going on today myself. This is the last 3 days of my contract at the university, and then we go on summer leave. And so I've got a bazillion people writing me for the last 3 days saying, do this, do that. And then they can't write me after Wednesday. So it's a lot of stuff right now. So
Yes, that's absolutely fine. We're glad that you're here when you're here. Andrew, to answer your question, I'm going to now do a quick screen share, because that's what I do. 1 second. And when I'm screen sharing, I can't see you, so please just interrupt if there's anything, okay? Because I think this is quite obvious. So this is just a mock-up thing that I think some of you have seen it a few times. These are all the articles, papers from last year. So we have the first sentence of the abstract, a link, the names of the contributors, and then the title. I've just made a defined thing so we can connect them. So in this, we have an AI summary, and then we have AI extraction of keywords and names. Not all of them have names. This is not pure AI. I'm very happy to go in and fiddle with it, add and remove as I see fit. That is really, really important, right? We have one kind of a tag. We don't call it tagging, we just call it this is a, right? And that is very, very important, because when we go to the map view now, everything crashed. Oh yeah, by the way, as you can see here on Facebook, it's Emily's birthday. That's all very nice. Right, so I go to the map view, and it starts as a complete mess. And, you know, we're not going to be spending the time doing all of this stuff. So that's why it's so important we have this opportunity here with hide and reveal categories. For instance, if I now bring back people, they're all selected. I really want you, as you are, to pay attention to this, because these are the kinds of interactions that I think are very useful. If you don't think they are, we need to really think about that. Because now, currently I have to do this via keyboard shortcuts, but this should be on the Prism control panel, I think. Now we have all the people selected, we can do this. Just align left. That will be absolutely crucial, because otherwise, how are you going to make sense out of this? And now I select all the people again, align left again, and then I do vertical layout. So to be able to do volume operations on the same kind of thing is just absolutely crucial. I'll do one more thing. Moving everything across. And then I do, as you can see here, hide all the documents, and then show the documents again. So here they are. If I now align them and now do this layout, of course they're too big, they're overlapping, but at least now we can begin to deal with it. Yeah, Leo, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can.
Okay, so about this, being able to do these multi-selects is crucial. My question is, are you sure? Because I also feel that certain actions are better in 2D than to translate them to 3D? And, you know, are you sure this is not a use case or action which might be better in 2D?
What I'm thinking about is we need to dream our way into XR, and we need to also inch our way. So first of all, this is of course right now in 2D, and I would easily say I need a bigger monitor. Right, so I think initially from this perspective, and this is entirely up for discussion, we should build something that works on a very large virtual monitor. And then also, Andrew, I'm not saying explicitly in the time sequence here, but we can look at curvature versus a flat monitor. We can look at, more cylinder design like we already have,
I
because
feel like consistency, we're going to want it to be curved, so the whole environment feels like it's wrapping around you. I'm not sure why we would ditch that at this point, but it is worth looking into.
yeah, I'm not saying we should ditch it at all either. What I'm saying is that I'm surprised at what seems to work and not work. So just as an interesting aside, on the iPad mini, been looking at the pencil. So the pencil works in Author right now. It's just there. It works really well until it doesn't. Right? Like, how do you undo? Right? There are many things. I'm working on it for my own software. Well, what I'm saying is that it's easy to think of a new interaction as giving more opportunities like XR, but it also really narrows it. Like the act of selecting by volume, do we really want a pop-up menu on the Prism, or do we want something more elegant? I just think we need to build and test. And Mark. I'm
thinking of that moment from Devil Wears Prada about, where's that piece of paper I had in my hand yesterday? Because forgive me, because I just don't know the current state of the app, but can I make an ad hoc selection? Because I use maps a lot every day in Tinderbox, have been doing it for, almost 20 years now. And most of the time I'm working with an ad hoc selection. So that, a way to signal that. Now, it might be a pre-applied keyword. So what it might be, in other words, before you even go into the map, you have some way in which you select the things you're really interested in, because trying to do it on the map, once it gets past a few items, is not really tractable. I think the other lesson from using sort of 2D mapping spaces for a long time is less is more. So you have a problem here, you're starting with way too much stuff. And just those top level filters don't actually help you enough, because they are unnatural constructs placed across the top. So the fact that something is an organization versus a person is very definable and understood, and it's not wrong that you can identify them as such, but it's not helpful, because probably you'll want organizations and people, just not all of them. So trying to take a sort of a reduction out of that. So the challenge is, how do you select / pre-select the things that you actually want to work with, and then the rest can either not be shown at all or can be way off somewhere to the side. Because you might want it still visible, because you might in the moment say, oh right, I need to demote this thing out of the current working set, or I need to pull this one in.
Yeah, Andrew, can I take that, or are you ready to pounce? Okay. You can do a few things already like this, just shift click and stuff, but your bigger point is very, very important. And I think that comes under the notion of being able to save views. That's definitely one of them. And on the more pedestrian side, which is really, really important, it should be possible to do some interaction where you hold down the equivalent of a shift key in XR. Say, I'm going to keep selecting now. We may do that as a gesture. We have one hand doing this and another, I don't know. But key is, Mark, that the concerns you're showing there are super important. One more thing before I give it over to Andrew, and that is, I got a prompt from Chris Gutteridge, whom I saw on Friday as well. He wrote a prompt to take all of these titles and summarize them into shorter titles. It was quite a clever little thing. And that's a view thing that I think we should definitely look at. How can we use techniques of whatever sort to make these things more scannable? Leon, you can wait till after Andrew, yeah? Or is it really on this point? Okay, Andrew, go.
Yeah, I just want to give a real quick reality check, which I hate being that guy, but I'm the developer for this. Troika is super efficient with large chunks of text and not that great with a bunch of little pieces. And since we need every single piece of text here, just like a word or two, because it's just titles and names and tags, they all need to be able to move independently. I really don't see a good way to optimize this. So I can still make this, we can still test it, great. But I already know it's going to have a frame drop whenever this loads in. If that's something that we're okay with, that's fine. Just putting it out there ahead of time.
Okay, that's really, really important to know because, and I'm very glad you're still here, Dini. On that very, very important point with Andrew, we do want at least all the papers from one conference to be visible on screen and the authors' names. So I'm wondering if this, because of what you just said, this might be a case where the names should be pre-rendered into images so they become like tiny little black on white cards, almost better illustrating this is a paper. Maybe we should start looking at techniques like that. I don't know, but this is definitely one of those important details that we could die on. Hi, Brandel. We're just talking about doing map type of things in XR and lots of other things, but we'll return to that later. Leon.
Yeah, so I had another thought. I'm trying to synthesize what we started with, basically the units of knowledge, which are going to be very...
Very crackly. Very, very crackly.
Oh, shit.
Even worse. Let's see. Do you have controls? Okay. Okay, why don't you just pause and write a note and then Peter talks. Please try again, okay? Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are there any alternative libraries to Troika? Maybe some sort of a vector-based font that would be more amenable to being done in small chunks?
There's definitely other rendering options. Troika right now is kind of the top that everyone talks about working in 3JS. But there's definitely alternatives for sure.
So just to elaborate on what we're talking about to where to go? Yeah, Brandel and Dini. We're talking about the project today, specifically this because it's so much fun and it's crunch time, because we have to get our ACM hypertext paper in by the end of the month. And we're now talking about the project a little bit more. We're going to talk about the papers at the end of the session today, because the notion of putting stuff in space has become so crucial to us that we're way past generalizations, and that's why we're digging into it. So I'm very excited with your yellow handout, Brandel. Please go ahead.
I was just going to make a pragmatic suggestion in terms of the kind of implementation that might be able to support stuff that you need to do to have independently addressable regions.
Okay.
Instead of having...
Oh, sorry.
So instead of having individual Troika elements, it may be possible to use Troika, maybe not. But the way you could do it is using a skin mesh geometry, where you apply skin weights associated with bones, where you have one bone. Do you know are you familiar with skinned geometries and the idea of skin animations and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. Just not in the
Andrew?
sense of text. I'm not exactly sure where you're going with that yet.
Right. So normally what you do with skin weights is that you have transitional weights where you have an elbow and you have the vertices in them, so that you have a gradient of weights from 0 here to 1 here to be able to kind of deform those things in those relative spaces. But there's nothing that prevents you from just using 0 or 1 for bones. And so you can have a bone which is for a paragraph and you have all of the vertices bound with 100% to that one. Then then what you're doing is actually just moving bones around with a single geometry where you have independently addressable things. So there's a little bit of reckoning. It's a possibility that you could hack Troika to do it, but what that would mean is that you could have one geometry that's all of those texts, or you could have a few that would be a large number of things that you're managing with each one. So instead of having one Troika object or one geometry object per line, you would have one per maybe 100 lines or something like that, and then have 100 bones that you're then
Yeah.
managing the manipulators on.
That's
Um,
super clever.
There's a
I don't think I can select them though, if that's the case, because they would all register the same sort of a hit test for my selection. I think they'd all return the same
true.
result.
So yeah, in that instance, you may need to manage what constitutes hit boxes differently in order to do it. But yeah, there are sort of it really depends on how hard it is and what optimizations you need to go through in order to be able to make it happen. So one of the things you could do there is given that you know that it's only going to be these things, you could have an XY insertion sorted list of things based on their Y position. And so then you can have, like n log n, like access into those things by figuring out where on that region it is, like or near linear, where like if you're there and you know that all of them are in order, like collision the collision detection is something that can be done much more efficiently if you know something about the relative order or you have confidence about the sort of structure of those things. So for example, maintaining an insertion sorted list of the vertical positions of all your guys is going to be really easy because it's always going to be almost always sorted and they're not sort of undergoing random perturbations. And so from that, you can link in pretty much exactly to where a hit is and stuff like that. So you can use much more expensive computation that doesn't have to come through it. But like the point to your point, like how far you go down that track depends on how efficient it has to be based relative to the But though, like if you must, if you must do all of those things, those are some pretty good starts. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in general, just working with like a smaller library or catalog, whatever we're going to call it at this point, should still be okay. But once we get into like the hundreds of Troika elements rendering, you can sort of feel the frame rate, and
Oh, of
having a
course,
frame rate
yeah.
drop in a headset is going to be rough. But
Yeah.
we can still have the functionality and stuff. And for the demo, maybe that's okay. I don't know. I just wanted to give people a
Yeah.
warning ahead of time. And if it's getting bad, I can really look into some of these alternative rendering
Yeah.
solutions.
I am really interested in whether you could pull Troika into leveraging a skinned mesh geometry off the bat, just hack it minimally to do that. Certainly, so I wrote for the Timeline VR, the Wikipedia thing, I wrote a full, WebGL text serializer for HTML so that you have the ability to get all of the geometry. What I didn't do at that point was, and on reflection, would have been a good idea, is to do this skin mesh geometry system where you have independently addressable pieces. I feel any regrets about it, but it's something that you could expand it to be able to do, and then that would be able to give you the work for it. It's only alpha thresholded rather than the signed distance field based text rendering, but beyond that, it's functionally equivalent to what Troika offers you, and you would be able to integrate this skinning and boning. I don't want to say trivially, but like in an afternoon of concerted effort. Sorry, I'm all done. Sorry.
All right. Can everybody hear me? I will do another attempt. Okay, so that is really interesting stuff. These approaches. I think that afternoon of work is probably going to be two evenings for me, but it's a pretty cool idea. There's one thing, and Ted Nelson is probably going to hate me for saying this, but do we really need these basically combination of everything on the screen and visible links? Like, to me, it sounds a bit like that might be a lot of optimizations for something which might be a bit overwhelming for the average user. And I'm thinking of ways to sort of mitigate this visible link stuff by perhaps introducing a good old school, old-fashioned tag filters. So basically you have your text in front of you, and on the side you have like tags which are generated or from Visual Meta or a combination. And basically if you click a tag, then it would basically filter out what is not tagged with that tag. And then to basically filter before you really do dragging stuff out, or because a document is a pretty big piece of data, and I was just thinking of maybe adding a step before doing really GPU or 3D intense stuff. So that's just my thought I had. Leon out.
I'm just going to circle back to when we were talking about curved space. I thought one thing to consider is a hyperbolic view. If I just share very quickly, oops, get the right thing. Oh, number one. So hopefully, are you seeing a map? Are you seeing yeah, okay, right. Okay, so this is unashamedly Tinderbox is just something I happen to be used to using, and it's been a long time in gestation. I know it's 2D, but I think it is perhaps pertinent here to this overload thing. So currently, and sorry, this is just a screen grab, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole trying to show you it live. The main point being that is sort of it's this to me speaks to the noise problem of having too much. So one of the things that's actually not shown in this picture is what's being done here is only linked items are being shown of the overall corpus. Well, that's akin to what in effect is happening in the reader and author map, because I'm going to put the people over here so you're not looking at the side of my head when I try and talk to the camera, talk to the people. So things that you can do is you, for instance, can cut out the cross links. So you can have it so that only things that are direct linear link through from the chosen item in the middle, which becomes a sort of pivot item of the display, are shown. Or you can put in the cross links, but that tends to make things much busier and goes back to the point that Leon makes that, despite Ted's point that actually it turns out that a lot of links just is an awful lot of links. So, what worked in his 1960s Tipex demo on a screen doesn't actually necessarily translate in scale. It's just unfortunate, but that's the way it rolls. The other interesting aspect is trying to work out how much information you need for something to actually be usable. So you'll notice here that the text isn't being drawn on the smaller items. And in fact, in the current implementation of the thing you're looking at, it actually cuts off after 7 items. So you can do, 6 degrees of affinity, but and this is pragmatic. 7 is just a figure that's there at the moment. But what it addresses is after a certain point, you also just get too much. So separate to the point raised when Frode was showing the original map well, how do you select what you want to see? Is this issue of basically of how do you avoid the overload? Because one of the things I think you want to do in a map is explore. And one of the things a map, if it's responsive to you, is really good for serendipitous discovery. in a way that you don't force it. You literally do serendipitously discover points, connections that you didn't really think about. And I think so that also in the XR space is one of the things it can deliver. So our challenge is to put the information into the space in a way that allows that. And just a last point, Ray, the text, I was just thinking back to the very point that, Andrew Brandell's just been going through, the difficulty of actually handling potentially this much text is to say, well, do we actually always need all the text? The more I use maps I find that I'm constantly trying to turn down the amount of visual. So abstract shapes and colors can be a really useful proxy, because if I've decided that as a person driving it, I know what it means. I don't have to reinterpret it. I appreciate that somebody else perhaps looking at it in the moment, I would have to explain it to them. But I think at this stage, a lot of stuff we're doing for the individual. So there is something to say in terms of the labeling and stuff, that less is more. Thanks. Shall I stop sharing? Okay, I can do it again if we want. Fabian.
So regarding the implementation itself, I don't want to give advice, but I'd rather suggest not to go back to, let's say, tag or 2D. Let's say if we flatten on a plane to have more text, if we lose the spatial aspect in the end by flattening or abstracting it away, I think we lose the potential of the medium. Of course, if we're at like 10 FPS and we have to puke, it's not good. But I would suggest then to benchmark it and say, for example, on a Quest 3 today, after 50 elements, Troika is not good enough. And then we sort in terms of display how many items are important for the task at hand, and then we display 49. And with an asterisk on the code and the paper, or however it's being shared to the world, saying that today in 2024, with this device, the usability threshold is that. But again, it's a little bit more argument every time in this kind of question is, okay, even if software has problem, like hardware keeps on getting better, the CPU, GPU, whatever chipset we use. So I think it's a safe assumption to say, okay, in a couple of months, years, the order of magnitude will be sufficient. So I think having a maximum threshold of item and an asterisk that say in terms of exploring like novel interaction that might make sense, I think we don't have to display the thousands of items to manipulate. And I know it's frustrating and we want to just not have to think in terms of sorting like what's important, but I think it's it happened to me also in the past, and I found that knowing what to display and having a threshold basically, and after this just saying it, communicating to users is enough at least to try if it makes sense.
Peter, go ahead.
Okay, another possibility might be a semantic zoom. Maybe when a cluster gets more than, say, 17 elements or whatever is going to break down under our current rendering ability, we replace it with counts of categories along whichever dimensions can best be used to cluster the elements in that clump. So it might be, 30 professors, 17 grad students, 21 practitioners. And then if you selected one of those, then it could expand into the full list for each one of the little sub-clusters. But the semantic zoom approach seems like an alternative to doing a gunshot splatter. The other possibility might be to pre-render representations of clusters with different numbers of elements and then just sort of drop it into a bin, assuming that once the count is at a certain level, the user isn't going to be able to distinguish that it's 47 versus 87. You could just sort of have one cluster representing a centroid for that number of elements arranged. So you get basically stock representations of clumps at different sizes based upon the fact that people aren't going to be able to do the count anyhow. And that might be able to serve as a substitute and be rendered very quickly because, of course, it would have been pre-rendered for a cluster within this certain range of sizes.
Yeah, sounds like an approach. Randall.
Yeah, I'm going to try to have it both ways. On the one hand, I totally agree. Like the function of rendering is to be legible, and so to that end, what you need is not necessarily like the absolute verity and truth of what it is, but something that allows you to be able to make the appropriate decisions. And so to that end, stylization is a necessary sort of component of being able to kind of pull back from the level zero level of detail that text tends to represent. So, you know, something that has been sort of a central motivator for me is like, how do you stylize text? How do you come up with characterizations that are appropriate at a degree of remove? But I think one of the things that Mark mentioned about the structure and the shape of things is really wonderful. So even in my Wikipedia article thing, it was for Quest 1 at the time, so much less powerful to Fabian's point, but it's something that is there to manage an ungodly quantity of text, and it succeeds in doing so with already its own form of stylization in the form of Greeking, which is where it's the process that Adobe Illustrator and others use, where you just use black lines that are appropriate to the layout of the actual words and word spacing, paragraphs and stuff like that. So it gives you some of the structural information that's appropriate there. And so if you have the ability to lean on color, then that's a really great mechanism for that sort of degree of remove stylization. If you have sort of persistent shapes, I think that Peter's concept of pre-rendered notions of higher order of complexity that you can use to stand in for themselves until you have the real estate for them is a reasonable one as well. But the reason why I want to have it both ways is because I think that it is and maybe this isn't the time for it, but I think that there would be something really instructive about being able to deal with just a stupid amount of data and to feel what it's like to be in that space without being encumbered by these rising but slowly rising ceilings, like Fabian was saying, of the complexity that you can manage without doing any more work. So again, I think that on balance, it's probably better to go, let's just not solve that problem. Let's stylize, let's work within the ceilings and characterize them as being transient. But also at the same time, if you're willing to, I think that there should be really interesting things from inventing a system that gives you a ceiling those orders of magnitude beyond, even if it only represents a momentary sort of piece that it doesn't integrate back into the whole, in order to go like, well, what do we get when we live here? What can we get away with? So that's, hopefully that doesn't sound too contradictory. It's just, yeah, in terms of the goals, for the immediate goals, I think that finding ways around it is reasonable. But in the event that you really want to do it, I think that there's real merit to getting stuck in and then just being able to give yourself a system that is that just has so much capacity that you are presented with and sort of confronted with manifestly different problems that would sort of obtain as a result.
So I have a question to the technical people. What needs, when we're talking about slowing down because there's too much stuff happening, what does that mean? Does that mean lots of things floating in space, or does it mean when they're being interacted with? What I mean,
it means all of the above.
All of the above, okay. Because
yeah, so it means the frame rate drops functionally, that you would end up dropping below your 72 or your 60 or whatever, and the problem with that is, yeah, like interaction looks bad. To some extent, Quest has the ability, hopefully it happens for you by default, Andrew, but you're getting you're getting time warp and space warp interpolated frames out of your WebXR, right? so that if you just move your head, then you're getting those interpolated frames. So you get that, but that's still not everything. And if you're animating, then you don't get to see the consequences of it. It's just for if you have a static world that you're just moving your head through. So it's just a you begin hitting the degraded experience of bad frame rates, which affect different people differently, but they're not good for anybody.
Right, because sorry, and I'm just some important confusing messages coming in. Right. So Mark made the point that it's also very important to hide stuff, something we've discussed for quite a while. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, that there is a limit to what can be shown. But, you know, in the beginning of the call today, Brandel, we discussed the kind of jokey thing about whether perspective gives us perspective or not. I mean, in theory, it's easy to see around something, but the example that Mark showed us, with that kind of a space, there was occlusion, and occlusion is not necessarily a good thing. So what we might do is take this as an opportunity for nesting. What I mean is having one map/graph inside another. So we have, we'll go back to the discussion of what level of resolution are we talking? Is it a library? Is it everything? Or is it a proceedings? Or is it a document? And show them relatively separately. It may actually turn out to be a blessing for the user. Oh, and one more thing, Brandel, before I forget. Last week, the work that Andrew did looked amazing on the Quest Pro, but in the vision, it was worse than unreadable. It actually looked like there was a Y-ray, whatever it's called, pattern on it. It was very, very odd. I don't know if you have any perspectives on that. Oh, by the way, just quickly, Andrew, have you had a chance to look at it in the Vision Pro since last Wednesday?
No, I can only go in on Wednesday, so I'll be going in this Wednesday.
Okay.
Well, VisionOS is only providing WebXR as a developer preview at this stage, so there's that aspect of it. I don't know. So the color gamma is wrong. That's a known issue. It's one of those things that Apple is required to exhort people not to fix, because it's the sort of thing that should be fixed on the implementation side. Yeah, I mean, anything about WebXR as it's currently provided is for developer purposes only. It's not on for customers. It's on for developers. Yeah.
So do you have any magic buttons or commands that Andrew can write into the code to make the vision look at least as good as it does on the Quest?
If you want to come work for Apple and work on our WebXR implementation, then I'm sure you'll be able to drag the standard forward. No, I don't. There's nothing that springs to mind. I mean, the color gamut is different. So if you have the ability to square all of the 0 to 1 values, what I've done in Three.js is inject a little bit of code into the on before compile of the shaders to do that. That's the sort of thing that Apple is asking for people not to do, because in the event that it becomes fixed, then it will break. But yeah, like no, I don't think that I have any particularly actionable things for how it's presented in VisionOS 1.
Okay. Leon.
Yeah, just for the video recording purposes and transcript, I would like to still add one more sort of, you know, have it both our ways, as Brendel also described it. I have seen, I have witnessed many situations where there is this point of, no, we can't do it in WebXR. It's gonna be too heavy, and then at some point there's always some person or group of person who do the impossible, and they usually do that by coming up with some very clever concept of translating the data to a shader. And sorry for being a bit technical, but it's basically also what LLMs do, is that they basically, there's a lot of early prototypes which actually used shaders to basically store data in textures. So basically not using textures for graphic imagery, but just to store data. And then they would basically have an incredible smart way of using that texture data to finally render something visually in another shader. And this sort of communication between shaders is incredibly fast. It all happens on the GPU. And sorry, this might be a bit of a sloppy explanation for this, but there is maybe, and this, I don't think it fits in this project, but there might be a way of basically translating a huge amount of documents into a huge texture. And I would imagine a combination of some opcodes, which maybe hints of this is a header, this is a paragraph, this is a quotation, etc. Perhaps even visual meta could be the opcodes, and then we would have another shader basically be able to render all that text in one shader, which means that it's like super high quality. And so instead of looking at this problem through the lens of Troika, which is basically also a shader solution for rendering a string of text, let's say one word or a paragraph, like instead of that we could make our own sort of Troika utility, which basically converts a whole document to a geometry. And so I don't want to bore everybody with this abracadabra, but yeah, there might be some very clever solutions in the shader side of things, and that might be interesting at some point to visit and to explore. But I have to stress, and that's my closing statement, that first we need to be able to know what kind of operations we would like to do in that shader side of things. Okay.
Leon, we have to get a better mic. That was Solar Storm, as Peter was writing. I think we got it. Mark, over to you, but a quick question. Brendel, I'm trying to use your dynamic view thing that you made, various sneaky paste glitch.me. It doesn't seem to be up. Could you have a quick look? Because I just want to check if the amount of space we had in our test thing actually renders in your space. All right. Thank you. And Mark, while I go on the headset for a bit.
Okay, just quickly, I'm just going to. Where's my screen share gone? Boo! Come on, Zoom. What are you doing? Zoom. Nope. I do wish they wouldn't keep redesigning the app so you lose things. Sorry.
And what are the designers going to do for money? So, Frode, if it has been asleep for a while, then it takes a while to wake up.
It just
when I
woke
go
up.
to the,
It just woke up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just trying to. There we go. Right.
Oh, and by the way, since you're waiting, Mark, look, I have this accessory for my vision that protects the inside. You know, it's I wonder why it wasn't shipped with that. I mean, it's just a lens cleaning cloth, but isn't that the really important side to clean?
It is shipped with it.
Not on the inside, really? Oh, the lens cleaning cloth, yeah. But that doesn't really, that's not big enough though, is it? Anyway, just a detail. Mark, please go while I
Okay. Well, I was trying, I don't know. Zoom has removed any ability. Oh, there, found it now. Right, just at the last moment. So, right, I take my words back. User error. So, can you see a rather messy map?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this was just reflecting on I think it was Fred's point about sort of nesting material, and I was reflecting on the fact this is something that's bugged the sort of the Tinderbox sort of community for some while, because the picture on the screen is basically a map. Doesn't really matter whether it's in 2D or 3D, but going to the visible lines. This is Ted's visible lines, and it's horrid, and it's just hard to work with. And yes, you can drop out visualizations of certain links or link types, but what it turns out is your mind tends to work faster than the controls can go. So you know the ones you don't want to see, but by the time you've managed to make those not seeable, then you've already moved on. You're trying to do something different, and that was, funnily enough, what led to this, because in a Tinderbox document, and again, I just an example, but one that I know a bit about because I've been using it for some while. A map is always a map view is a view spec of one container in the outline that is the canonical storage form of the document. So the problem comes that if you want to see things on the same map, they have to be in the same container, which both means you have to have you can end up with very large containers, and also you just end up with very busy maps. And often what people want is a small, they don't want enormous containers and stuff, but they want to see relationships. And this is a solution to do it. Now, in this case, it has to have links explicitly made, but in reality, if we think forward a bit, those could perhaps be being computed on the fly for you. So I don't think that nesting things, except in this sort of semantic zoom that Peter mentioned, where basically you aggregate bits towards the outside of the graph. So in this sense, while the little group at the bottom might cluster and show itself as a different shape, or it might show itself as a number on a shape or something, indicating that you've effectively aggregated things. So without sort of saying to naysaying sense, I'm not sure that explicitly nesting things helps, because you also get back to the old problem from the early days of visual metadata, which is, does the brown dog go in the brown folder and the dog folder, or does it go in both? Hierarchies outline hierarchies normally don't really fit real world data very well. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would be really curious about with that, Mark, is whether in an environment where parallax is a usable component of view manipulation, that that graph becomes easier to be able to follow. What's definitely the case is that so my contention is my suspicion would be that it would. That said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Eventually, something becomes overwhelming, and 3 dimensions is no perfect panacea against that.
But I'd agree with you.
Having the ability to,
I think your point is well made about seeing it all.
Yeah, because if you can look around it, if you can kind of prioritize and structure your viewing to be able to make selections and focus in on things. I was staring out the window the other day, looking at somebody's spinning little fan on the top of their house that got damaged during a storm, and it was remarkable how differently large it looked depending on how hard I was concentrating on it. And I imagine from your Navy time, you experienced that magnification, that attentional magnification when you're really focusing on something, and it completely belies the actual size of the visual feature in comparison to the amount of attention that you're able to pay to it. That said, I'd still agree that no structure, no system like that gets you completely out of jail. And that's where I think that the idea, you were talking about the dangers and the downsides of containment, and I also agree with that. And that's where I think stylization is a more comprehensive and inclusive term for what it is you want to do to the structure of nodes, to the relationships that you see, because all you need to know is some stuff about them. And it could be that it's related to hard containment. It could be to do with there being some conceptual containment where you go like, oh, here are 10 authors or 10-ish authors or 10 author-ish things or some sort of stylization like that, because the amount of detail that you're able to attend to, it's not so much that you need to know that these are strict categories that those things are under, but that's approximately what it is that you'll get if you go back to attending to that thing. And so trying to sort of work out that's awesome. Trying to go back, trying to work out what is sort of discernible about those things, what can be done to construct those stylizations in a manner that's shovel ready, I guess, is the challenge, but I think a better and more fruitful one to pursue than strict containment or showing all of the edges or anything like that, because yeah, features get too small, regions get too cluttered, all of those kinds of things, and so being able to have heuristics for what are reasonable and discernible kind of characterizations to privilege the stylized view with at that point is the thing to get at.
Yeah, because very quickly before Frode takes over, because you see it's a hand up, but to just draw on your point, the thing I showed with the hyperbolic view, so the colors there and the colors and the shapes are all due to the prototypes being used within the document. So that's how that's done. So you just decide. So it goes back to these ad hoc, effectively these ad hoc groups you want to make are actually quite easily done, because you can ask for a thing, you can give it all a prototype, and they're all of a type now. And then you can quite fluidly do this. Frode, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I am so grateful for this discussion. We spent 5 minutes, there you go. We spent 5 months to get to this point. We've done a lot of walking around the issue. Andrew's done a lot of building foundations. What Mark and Brandel kind of disagreed on is, I believe, the whole point, and we need to really dig into this. I mean, that's why I'm happy to now have the ACM Hypertext paper be high resolution thinking, because we need to figure out what that means in this context. And that means how to hide stuff, how to manipulate stuff, what should be on screen, what shouldn't be, how do you connect things or nest them. It's, to me, okay, I don't know if you heard, Brandel, because I mentioned in the very beginning, I got my PhD today. And the very first work that I did, Brandel's not listening. Brandel is not
No,
listening.
I heard. So do you mean you received it? You were awarded? Or
Oh, that's funny. Your video was extremely delayed there. Yes, no, I mean, I got the confirmation email that they said, okay, forget it. This has taken too long. Just bugger off. Slightly better language.
congratulations.
Thank you. So it's
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's nice. So the very first work that I did when I started this PhD was on what Mark and Adam made live. The beige version was one of my tests in 2016, right? And now we've come to the point where we can do things like this, and it's not just, pardon my honesty, bullshit demos, right? We've looked at the infrastructures, we've looked at the metadata available from ACM, we have various ways we can deal with it. So to now discuss and disagree on how to display stuff in XR is, to me, absolute heaven. I couldn't imagine anything nicer today. One more thing to mention, I just took Brandel's rough and ready, saying that humorously, what he did 2 years ago for us in the headset now, loading up the same view that you saw in Author that had all the papers. It rendered with absolutely no delay. It was absolutely perfect. There are lots of design issues that needed to be changed for it, but in terms of performance, absolutely no issues. So that may be something, Brandel, if you don't mind, sharing with Andrew. So what happened there? Sharing with Andrew so that he can look at it in parallel with the techniques he's using now. That would be really lovely if you could do that.
Oh yeah. So Andrew, the thing that's at very sneaky pace, I can see if I can give you the when the code is plain text there, none of it's a built system or anything like that. It's all of the stuff that's linked off of here, and I just write it in the text editor on the glitch. But it's just using that WebGL text serialization system that I mentioned that the timeline VR was built for. Yeah, albeit in this one it's a much more simplified thing. Actually, is it even, or is this just? No, this must be because I think. Oh no! I think these are just alpha thresholded textures. I don't think I'm even using the WebGLizer. So then, yeah, this is just the process of, rendering text to canvas here. So the SDF shader material is probably doing a lot of heavy work. But if we back out of them, we can get a lot more stuff on screen.
For those who want to try that, I can upload all of this now if you want to have a look. It's actually really quite impressive what Randall has done here. I'm going to expand the workspace.
Yeah, I happened to have it up while you loaded it, and so I have the view of it all, and it's like, oh wow, that's coping. That's fun.
Yeah, this is special. And just to share my screen with you guys, because now that I'm just preparing it to put it up there, these names are obviously too long. So it's an example of having to do these transformations using a keyboard shortcut for layouts. So, it should be at least as fast as this to do these things in XR, right? So, I'm just taking some high up, some low down, pressing V for vertical layout, and then align left. That's all. Okay, so I'm now going to save this. Actually, yeah, I'm going to take these guys. This is a test document, so it doesn't matter what I really do. I'm going to take the locations and try to move them way a little further on. Save, close, and then I go to Gerald desktop. What is it? There it is. Go to the Chrome, drop the file. Oh, I should probably reload before, shouldn't I? And here we are. So if you go to that page in your headset now, you will see this.
You need to be on. You need to already be on the page in order for it to load.
Yeah, if you want to,
it has no memory.
Yeah, if you want to try it, I will very happily do the huge amount of work of redragging it. Mark, you want to try this?
Go to very sneaky place.
There are occasional circumstances in which Vision OS outperforms Quest and WebXR. I don't know if this will be one of them. Vision OS 1. One would hope that things improve in the future, but yeah, apparently Gaussian splats are already better in Vision OS, which is gratifying.
If I go to this page, do I see what's loaded at the moment? I don't have to load anything into it.
No, it's the opposite.
No, what you would need to do is be on the page when Frode drops it on. So it doesn't have any memory, but as soon as you're on the page,
I'll drag it over again. Andrew, do you want to go in as well? Shall we all dive into the same?
And yeah, for anybody with the content already up on their screen, they'll get a second copy of it, unfortunately. So you would want to reload your page there and
please tell me when you're ready,
dump it on.
guys.
No, it's going to take me half an hour to type the URL in.
No. No, it shouldn't. If you go to future text.
Yeah.
So this is what I try to do. Hang on. Zoom is interfering with my life. There it is. Yeah, if you
It
go,
runs quite well.
it's good, right? Yeah, so if you go, Mark, to Future Text Cloud, and then you go to XR Experiments.
Yeah.
Scroll down to XR Experiments prior to 2024. And then scroll down to Constellation. It's inside Constellation.
Right. It's one thing. Text handling in XR is rubbish. Just it thinks every time I touch text that I want to select it rather than edit it.
Yeah, so I sent that email finally to Bruce Horn, and he forwarded it. It is mostly, even with a keyboard, it suddenly wants to look at things, and whether it's WebXR or native, I mean, in Author, I'm having a very interesting design time.
I should be fair in saying that it's very much a first world problem. So I'm on the 2024 page, and I go down to where?
You go down to VR experiences. Oh yeah, you are in that. Go down to Constellation.
Constellation. I can't see that on the page.
What does
I'm
it
on 2024. I'm on the dates on 2024. Is that
Hang
wrong?
on. Go from the first page again, please.
Okay, hold on. I'll just go to the start page. Oh, which I can't do with a handset, interestingly. I can do it with a finger. Go on. Just no. So it's 3 clicks to tell it you want to actually insert the insertion point. Interesting.
All right. So you're on the main page, right? Front page.
Almost. Right. So I'm on .info. Yeah. Go to XR experiments.
Scroll down to quite far down. Previous XR experiences, XR experiment, blah, blah, blah. Prior to 2024, click on that.
Yeah.
And then scroll down to Constellation and click on the title Constellation, and that should open it for you.
Got it. Got it. Sorry. There at last.
And I'm going to now drag it over. Tell me when it's a gray screen rather than white.
I've got a black screen at the moment. So I need to say enter VR probably.
No. Now enter VR.
Okay. No, I can see it now. Yeah. Okay. Ooh.
It's such a silly, but it's it was hurled together and it seems to work. So
no, it's great. I used the main trigger and pulled, and it rotated everything around, which was rather fun. And so I'm getting zoom on the little mushroom hat on the control. No, this is great. This is great.
Oh yeah, in the 2D view of the 3D world.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, it is interesting, and of course, what it reveals is the sense of we get all this way, and this is really good, and then think now, but now what am I really doing? Because you're probably going to end up, unless you basically want to explore a computed graph for you, i.e., it's been laid out for you. It's at this point you normally start doing hand selection.
Yeah.
Which
that works in WebXR, so you can get in there and then you either point at or something. Is it pinch? I can't remember.
It's pinch. You see, Andrew, this is something. We have our distance thing, and we have our laser pointer, which has been discussed with much emotion. One thing we may want to do, I don't know if you all remember Soft Space. It had a make a fist and you move the whole room kind of a thing. And Randall had in the mural pinch and move the whole thing. So seeing how lovely it is to touch these, I'm touching straight on them and things happen, but things are too far away on the sides. So to be able to toggle between touching and manipulating one thing versus doing either scaling or moving the whole thing would be a very interesting further interaction. What do you guys think? What do you think of the touching notion, Andrew?
Well, I know we had originally touching text and nobody liked it at the time. We can look back into re-implementing it of some sort.
How did you feel about the
fine.
way the touching thing works right now in this?
Like the pinch to interact?
Yeah. So
I mean, they're going to expect it to do the same as the remote pinch effect.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the pinch effect is the hover effect.
So you can see my screen, right?
Yeah, you've got a box over the top of it, but we can see it.
Okay, sorry. So I'm just wondering for everyone, putting a lot of our work together into something. How about we do a test in your environment, Andrew, where pinch.
Oh, would you be able to, Frode, can you look at your screen? Can you minimize the Chrome window?
You should be seeing my vision view.
We are, but
We
behind
do,
the
but
Chrome.
We see a Chrome window in
yeah,
front
so
of us.
there's a,
Okay. Hang on a second. Now do you see the Chrome window?
No,
I know you
We
don't
do
see
not.
the vision, but you see the Chrome window.
no.
Okay.
no, now we just see your desktop.
So let's see how this works.
I got a good feeling about it. I think it was a bug on Vision OS's part that was showing the Chrome window still, but
Out of interest, is there a control in the Oculus that controls the sensitivity? I find hand tracking is much more shaky in 3 than 2. So unless I've suddenly my hand shakiness has increased markedly, it's virtually I find it virtually impossible to point at something in 3, because at the moment my hand stops, suddenly the pointer just starts going haywire. In other words, it starts processing seemingly of its own accord. I think it's taking micro tremors from the stop position and magnifying them. But of course, it makes it virtually impossible to do something like putting an insertion cursor into text at the right place.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think I've observed that as well in Quest 3. It could be to do with the illumination conditions in your environment. One of the challenges with any of these things is the processing. Like, we don't normally think about the fact that a mouse these days is sort of facilitated by a camera, a very small, very high fidelity, very high frame rate camera that is optically looking at the surface underneath it in order to be able to do it. Like, most of our reckoning about the internal machinations of basic pointing and touching and stuff like that are done well enough for us to avoid needing to think about them at all. That's not the case with hand tracking on a mobile chipset at this point, unfortunately.
Let's stay in here. Let's stay in here
you
for
could
a minute
attend
without
to the
coming into the quest land too much. Is that okay? I mean, please finish, Brandel, but let's just go back to this afterwards.
Yeah, sorry, crack
so
on.
I just it's hard. It maybe being in better lighting, but definitely, like, if you can use controllers, then they're better at it because it's cheaper for it, and it might the performance may attenuate because of the system performance as well. If you move your hands out of your view and then show your left one first, then that may help.
Oh, I lost everything. Okay, right. You can all see this now, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. So what I want to know from the team as a way of combining things is, obviously this needs to be at least slightly spherical. If we can keep it so it's this close, obviously the person can move back and forth for interactions like this and other interactions. Maybe, and this is what I really want to hear what you guys have to say, maybe the other hand, let's not say left because we can reverse it for left-handed, but the other hand can do actions such as if they do a gun thing, they move the whole thing or scale it. So we have, two-handed interaction. So these mean different things. So I can do this and move the space like the mural, something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh,
It's
to be able to
funny,
move the whole thing.
Have you all tried Brandel's mural? But for those of you who may not have tried Brandel's mural, it's the simplest thing ever in XR, and it's very powerful. This was when Bruce Horn was more of an active part of our community, and he does these wall-size murals. So all Brandel did in terms of the user experience, not the technical expertise, all he did was took it in as one joined image on a floor. And we first did the whole joystick walking. We felt a bit queasy, so he changed it. So if you pinch and move, it moves the entire mural, which is visually the same, but you don't get queasy. You know, the human brain is the oddest thing. So to be able to do this on a massive thing is actually very powerful. And Yuli in Softspace, you had something, remember in the previous version, you grab, and now you move the entire workspace. So combining that with being able to pinch and move things might be very powerful over.
I'm reminded that I ended up watching, because it just happened to be on Minority Report, and I was grinding my teeth because I kept saying to myself, it's not that easy every time they were doing their wonderful gestural stuff.
Exactly. Reality is a funny thing in that sense. Okay, Andrew, I said something controversial. You're the one with the most important opinion at the moment. What do you feel about that kind of an approach?
I mean, the pinch to drag. I'm pretty sure Adam put together some demos that actually test that. And of course, Brandel's got his demo right here. I would say it works well in those tests. It's very much not something that we've implemented in my environment. So suddenly having it only work in one space would be really strange. I can still implement it if you want.
Well,
I almost feel like if we have that test already working, why redevelop it? Why not put the time towards something else? But
I agree. And Andrew, one of the things I really like about working with you is you're really trying to be flexible. So thank you. I'm trying now to really look at compromises for further testing. And once you're, in the environment you built so far is a cylinder, right? So, the same kind of grabbing wouldn't make sense in a cylinder. And we have agreed that curvature is really, really useful. So maybe what we want to do is quite simply live with the cylinder, positively live with it, right? But have a thing which allows you to move the whole display, not just one item.
that's good. That makes sense. Yeah, have a global turn the entire cylinder around. That's good.
Yeah, so move, as in move camera in a sense, right?
Great.
I did
I like
3D back in the 90s. Right. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and we didn't do the papers talk. So let's just do a few major points now and see if we should continue that on Wednesday. Number one, I've seen already that Peter would like to work on the high resolution thinking. Do we need a more plain paper just explaining what this is, or should we put this work as the main bit in the high resolution thinking paper?
I'd suggest doing that. Otherwise, I think they're going to be too many papers floating around in this. I think the useful the thing to bear in mind is that we need to have something in the proceedings in order for this to be quotable and usable beyond. That's to a certain extent, that's one of the points of the paper.
Yeah.
If we want, we can do it as effectively as a 2-page extended abstract. That means that the activities that we'll show will be something of record within the proceedings, but we don't have to write as much. Or we can do a 6-page minus references thing if we want. We don't have to do 6-page, what I mean, but that's the other option is essentially as a paper in the practitioner track, in which case where essentially what we'd be reporting on is what we're doing. I don't think it makes sense to put in the blue skies track because and start talking, unless you want to do another paper about high resolution tracking, but with a week to go, I think that's not a great idea. I would suggest we make sure we have by close of play on the 26th, or probably a day before, and then I can try and put it into Overleaf for you to get, so we get a nice clean input. But
So-
we just have basically a summary, partly explaining what this project is doing, why we're doing it, and essentially some of the headline things of what we found and why we're demonstrating them in Poznan.
Yes, obviously I agree with my colleague, Dr. Anderson. And what I think we should do is all of that, but to further elaborate a little bit, I would really like it if all of you wrote a paragraph for this paper. Now, whether it's going to make the final cut or not, I don't know, because we only have 6 pages. But I think a bigger version of this paper will be the future of text paper that we write. So if you write a lot and there's only a little bit now, that goes for what I'm writing too, that should be relatively okay. You will all obviously be credited. So what I would request then is, starting with you, Rob, that you write a little bit of what this environment might be in Portal. And that also means you can cite yours and Dini's paper. Does that make
Okay.
sense? Great.
Yeah, I've been thinking about metaphors for this process. And since I have some archaeology background, I'm really thinking about this in terms of what's the process in archaeology? How do you excavate? How do you plan to excavate? What do you need to have in mind before you start? How do you do a test trench? Stuff like that.
That's wonderful. I'm going to email. I really will make an effort to email what I have by end of close tomorrow, so at least you guys can look at it. Fabienne, I'm officially tasking you, not asking you. I'm tasking you with the notion of your connected intelligent blocks, how they might work in a high resolution thinking environment. It seems like a natural fit, but I don't know what that means. That's cool, right? Excellent.
I'd also just
I'm
a
sorry.
quick thing is to work out. There are 2 ways, and also which we can recognize what's going on here. There are, I mean, there's who's going to be the lead author. That's for you and Dini to sort of sort out between you. But who wants to be, in a sense, one of the authors of the paper? But even if they don't, we probably need to have some acknowledgements of what people have done. So also, if you're writing a few notes, if there's some way that you would like to be, sort of memorialized in that. If only so that you get to say what you do rather than somebody else saying it, that will probably be useful for whoever puts a paper. I would suggest that it might be useful certainly for Andrew to be a credited author on the paper, because looking around the room, most of us are a bit further along in things and probably don't have a great need for an extra publication.
Just writing that down.
My next one will be my first, but I'm not in a hurry.
Well, that's super. No, I was having a discussion with Adam because I'm going to do a small demo on the side with him about something else. But I said to him, it's entirely up to you. And he's saying, well, I don't have a need. I said, that's fine, but you can do it. You could be a published person.
Yeah. No, totally. I would appreciate it.
Yeah, we can see that. It's Emily's birthday, so I can't be too many minutes over. Leon, you can write anything you want, but one thing I would like to see is basically taking this entire world and compressing it into URLs, because that notion you've been working on is just amazing. What would the love child of a URL and JSON be?
JSON LD?
Yeah, that's too reality based. Brandel, you're obviously, depending on how you feel what's appropriate, absolutely very, very welcome to choose aspects of this that you think is correct, considering where you are. And Mark, no need to tell you what to write. So on that note, I'm going to pause recording. Any other final bits to have on the record for today? Anyone want to say hi, Claude? Hi, Claude. Thank you for doing a great transcript. Anything other than that?
A happy birthday to Emily, of course.
Oh, thank you. I will be happy to convey. Right. Okay. Pausing.